it closes, and then you realize that they're in the mouth of a giant creature, and it does like the spaghetti slurp, like goes and it
Yeah.
just slurps it up, and then it just dives down into the pits of hell.
Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak,
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
and we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel. Yeah.
All right, here we are.
Yeah.
It is spooky season. It is
Yes.
October 2024 as of this recording. So we're just going to continue along here with our spooky season horror themed movies for the month. And let's get started.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So our next one here is directed by Peter Jackson. It was released July 19th of 1996. It is what some consider to be a cult classic at this point.
Yeah.
And today the Panel Bros are going to be doing a breakdown for The Frighteners.
Yes, bro. I was so excited. I remember when I was a kid, my introduction to this movie was my cousin. My uncle was big into the movies, and one day my cousin came over and they had this VHS tape. And they were like, we had this new movie called The Frighteners. And I was like, The Frighteners, what is that? And they were like, oh, you're going to love it. It's got supernatural thing. It's got ghosts. And they were like, there's comedy in it. And they were like, think about like Ghostbusters, think something like that. So as a kid, I was like, say less, fam. I was like, Ghostbusters is my favorite, say less. So I was so excited to get into this movie. And I was very pleased to say that as a kid and as an adult, I love it just as much.
Yeah, it's funny you say Ghostbusters because that was a big comparison that the movie got when it came out. Just the fact that how it was able to bring together horror and comedy, and a lot of the special effects and some of the themes too, that we're going to get into. So I figured this is a movie you've been raving about for some time now. So
oh yeah, for sure. Especially when it comes to the horror film lineup. Because again, there are certain horror films like we just did Oddity, which is a very serious take. And it's a fantastic movie. And every once in a while, it's nice to just dive into like a more fun horror movie. And that's the great thing about the genre with horror. You can mix comedy and things of that nature into it. So I've been excited. I've been ready to talk about this one for a good minute.
Yeah, and for me, I remember seeing the trailer for The Frighteners, and the trailer was kind of scary. And at the time, I wasn't really big on horror, not that big, So I was just like, all right, I'll just wait till it comes out. I have gone to the theater to see horror, but at the time, no, I'll just wait. And then when I saw it on VHS, I said, this isn't scary at all. It has scary moments, but
Yes.
it's not a truly scary, movie. So there was I'll never forget there's this one screenshot they show you in the trailer that we're going to focus on for the breakdown here. And to me, that was the one where it let me know. I was like, no, that looks a little too scary for me to go. So
yeah.
So yeah, that's as far as that goes.
I love the fact that we're going as far back as talking about we both saw it on the VHS.
Oh yeah.
Not a DVD, not a Blu-ray. It's like the VHS, bro.
Yeah, in the 90s. So let's start here with our plot. We have our opening scene here. We have this lady running through a clearly haunted house. It's grabbing at her through the walls and the carpet. And I took a note here. Pretty decent effects for 1996.
Yeah. If you were to see it for the first time today, you might be like, oh, wait a minute. But again, for 96, they had a lot of fun with these effects. And it was cool seeing it use the walls, the carpet, and using that to shape itself. That was really cool.
And to close out the opening scene, you see the old lady with the shotgun. She cocks it, and then the wicked will be punished. Bang, and we have our title card, The Frighteners.
It's a great cold open, because again, if you didn't know that there were going to be comical elements, this cold open has no comedy in it whatsoever. Right. It's just a very scary ghost chase scene. She's running through the house, she's screaming, and then her mother comes out with the shotgun, says her piece, shoots at the carpet, destroys it, and this thing's trying to get a hold of her, like it's grabbing her through the neck and whatnot. And then it cuts to our title card, So again, if you did not know that there was comedy involved, you wouldn't believe it, because it starts off with a very, very serious horror cold open.
So we have Dr. Lucy. She arrives to tend to the cut on Patricia,
Mhm.
and it's a deep cut that needs stitches, as she says, and her mother's against it. So Lucy also sees bruises on Patricia, making the situation more suspicious. And her mother threatens that Patricia can get locked up at any time. She says she's not an accessory, but she is a murderer. So
Mhm.
now we're building a mystery here. Patricia seems to be very scared of her mother.
Mhm.
And we see the cut on her arm. We see the bruises on her neck. And the doctor's just like, something isn't right here. How about you come down to
Yeah.
the hospital? Let's take a look. And the mom's like, no, she cannot
Yep.
go. But not pleading, just like in a threatening manner. So
Yeah.
it's just what's going on here, you know?
Yeah. The dynamic of the scene in particular, we have Patricia very, very scared, very afraid of her mother. You see the bruises, and Lucy, as you mentioned, is like, let's go. She's like, no, and her mother's very just like, no, like she will not go. And she kind of teases the audience a little bit and is like, this is what they believe, but this is what I know about my daughter, and I could have her locked up if I wanted to. I know the truth, like, and so we're kind of taken back a little bit, because we're like, well, what is she referring to? What does she mean? We still don't know yet.
So we then shift to a news report here, and the information in the news report shines a little more light on the situation. In 1964, in the town of Fairwater, California, orderly Johnny Bartlett is executed for killing 12 people at a sanatorium, driven by his ambition to become the most prolific serial killer. His teenage lover, Patricia Ann Bradley, is treated as an accomplice and sentenced to prison.
Mm-hmm.
Many years later, she is released into her mother's care and kept under strict house arrest. So now we know why the mother
Yeah.
was so strict about the situation.
Yeah.
In 1990, Frank Bannister, played by the great Michael J. Fox,
Yes.
a successful architect, is a self-centered husband to his wife, Deborah. And during an argument, an inebriated Frank crashes his car, and police later find Deborah dead nearby with the number 13 carved into her forehead. Frank has no memory of the event, but the trauma grants him the ability to see the spirit world. In the present, Frank lives in the unfinished remnants of the dream house he was building for Deborah. And racked with guilt over her death, Frank has become a cynical con man, using his abilities to quote unquote exorcise hauntings staged by ghosts in his empty employ. We have the street gangster Cyrus, the
Hmm.
nerdy Stewart, and the judge, an Old West gunslinger. So
Yes.
let's take a little peek at our team here.
Bro,
And
they're so cool. Cyrus is so cool, man. I don't played by Chi McBride, and he's just awesome. And then you have Stewart, who's kind of like our nerdy character, if you will. As you can see, you got the whole 70s get up. Like, just this image alone, like, I'm so intrigued, right? Like, as a kid, I'm like, okay, I know Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future movies, and I'm like, look at these two ghosts next to him. You got this guy, with the 70s look. You got Stewart, who's got this quote unquote, he's got the bow tie, the glasses, button all the way to the top, very nerdy. And I'm just like, all right, this image alone looks a lot of fun. I got to see what's going on.
yeah, and once again, just for 1996, not bad.
Yeah, dude.
We-
There's a couple times where I'm very curious if they were in the shots with him, or were they in a separate, the whole green screen, and then insert it later, because there's a lot of good back and forth at times where I'm like, oh man, I wonder if they're actually on set with him or not, and he's just kind of acting by himself, and then they put it in post. But they do a really good job, man. It's really good.
yeah. So the thing that I put down here was you sort of know something is up when he returns to the doctor's house. We don't know that that's the doctor's husband when he
Mhm.
runs over the fence.
Oh
So,
God.
yeah, he runs over the fence, and then, because he was distracted at the time.
Yes.
And he says, hey, listen, just
let me exchange information. I'll pay for the whole thing. So to get out of it, he exorcises the house.
Yes, he's such a con man. So like he's driving his Beetle, his yellow Beetle, and he's looking through the papers, being distracted. I'm like, all right, who can he con next? And he happens to crash through this guy's front yard, destroys the gate, destroys the front yard. It's awful. You know what I mean? The character Ray loses his mind. It's like, I'm gonna sue you. I'm gonna do this. And Frank gives him the card, and Ray takes one look at this card, and he's kind of like, I forget the exact wording, but it has to deal with the supernatural and psychic abilities and exorcism and things of that nature. And he's like, you kidding me? And he kind of just rips it up and tosses it. And he's like, I'm going to sue you, this and this. I want to make sure you pay for this. I got your license plate. And I love the fact, that Frank is like, all right, you know what? I'm going to send some ghosts over there. we're going to haunt the house. I'm going to clear your house. And that's going to kind of be my way of like working out a deal with Ray. It's a pretty funny idea.
The exorcism, it's a pretty fun moment.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Like he brings out this contraption, he's wearing gloves, and he captures the spirits in this little like bag. Let me throw it in the garbage disposal.
It looks so cheap. Like it's so cheap. So obviously the ghosts are in the house and they're lifting the bed, they're moving like a Raggedy Ann doll. Ray's beating it with a pillow.
Yeah, it's funny.
Like one of the funniest aspects is like she's clearly like, we have to call Frank. We have to call Frank. She has the card. We have to call Frank. And you see literally everything in the kitchen floating around Ray. And Ray is seeing this and he's just like, I can handle it. Like, I'll take care of it. I can handle it. And like, as you mentioned, Frank shows up with the cheapest gear I've ever seen. Like, this is like some easy bake oven thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's got to smack it a few times for it to work. And he pulls out a 9mm Beretta. And like, you kind of go, what do you need that for? And he shoots it and he's like, holy water. And it's a water gun.
Yeah.
And he just sprayed it. And Ray's the best part of the scene because Ray's just holding a rag to his head. And Ray knows that this is all a charade. Like, he's like, dude, whatever. Like, just please stop. And how much is it going to cost? And Frank's like, oh, it's going to cost you this. It's going to cost you this for the gear, $450, an additional $100 for the supplies and gas. And he's like, or I can do it for free. And, we can just call the fence and gate and pull the, just don't have to worry about that. And, Lucy's like, just do it. And he's like, all right. And again, he traps him in like this little purple doggy bag. It's like purplish blue. And he's like, you guys want to keep it? And obviously they're like, no. And he puts it down the drain and he just shoves it down. And he turns it on and he goes, don't worry. They can't feel a thing. At least that's what the good book says. And I'm like, how would anybody buy this? Like, how would this is ridiculous. And Lucy, she was just like, yeah, this is legit. And Rachel's like, good, for the love of God, man. The whole thing is a mess, but it's really fun to watch.
So while exercising the home of physician Lucy and her self-absorbed husband, Ray, Frank notices the number 37 glowing on Ray's forehead.
Oh, yeah.
So Ray later dies of what seems like a heart attack. As Frank helps Lucy communicate with Ray's ghost at a local restaurant, he witnesses a Grim Reaper-like entity crush the heart of a man marked 38. Mm-hmm. So we're going up in numbers here.
Yep.
Panicked, Frank flees and follows a heavenly light to the museum, where he discovers the number 39 victim and the Reaper's next target, newspaper editor Magda Reese Jones. So before we get to the wild scene at the museum, which is wild.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, now we're playing with the elements of the afterlife, and which is good because we have ghosts, but we need to find out where they're going to go. Is there something? Is there, they're trapped between worlds? What's going on here? So the movie writes its rules. It takes it from, the common, spirituality, what we imagine what the afterlife would look like. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's pretty cool the way they explain it. He says, if you don't go into the light, then you're trapped here. Then you're trapped between both worlds. But when he sees these people lose their lives, he actually sees them shoot up into the sky.
It's a very, very cool visual. And I like the rules. I do like the way I like when movies have rules for things like this. And it's explained like if you miss it, you have another opportunity in time, but you have to wait. And I want to go back to when he saw the number on Ray's head.
Sure.
What was really great about that moment was like we just saw like this really slapstick scene. Like it's really slapstick, it's really ridiculous, really funny. And then you just have this number out of nowhere. And Michael J. Fox does a great job as an actor because then his whole persona kind of changes. Like he realizes like whatever he's seeing is freaking him out. And we don't know the context of why just yet, but there's a significance on why that freaks him out. And I remember the first time I was watching it, kind of just being like, "Oh, I wonder what that is. Like, what's with the number? I have no idea what the number is." And even watching it now on a rewatch, it's always interesting to see his reaction because he's legitimately bothered by it. And he even asked the ghost. He goes, "Who was the guy that put the number on his forehead?" And they're kind of just like, "What?" And he goes, "It wasn't funny." And like, there's this intense feeling to it. And we're like, okay, so he has a connection to it. We don't know yet, but he does have a connection to it. And then we get to see it happen again at the restaurant with the gentleman that goes up in the tunnel. And it's a really nice moment too, because the guy ends up passing away and he looks up the tunnel and he goes, "Mom." And it's like it's a little thing like that just makes it like we just saw something tragic happen. But at the same time, like you get the beautiful, blue and white tunnel, the sky opens up and he gets to go up. And the fact that Frank gets to see it, it's a really cool element. And like you said, if we're dealing with spirits and supernatural and all these ghosts are here, we're kind of like, well, why are those ghosts still here? Was there never an exit plan? But you do see, no, there is an exit, but some ghosts decide to hang around.
Yeah. So speaking of the rules, before we get to the museum scene, we start establishing that the ghosts can walk through the walls, like we know they have the ability to touch, like poltergeists,
Yes.
and then if they can be quote unquote damaged, but it's in a cartoon manner.
Yes.
Like I can't explain it. Just the big face or like they're getting blown away, but then they rematerialize, and it's really funny actually.
It is because usually, and again, it's a nice little additional dynamic to the ghosts, because if you're watching majority of ghost movies, usually a ghost just goes through a wall. Like if you try to hit a ghost, you will go through it. If an object were to go through a ghost, they would just go through it. In this movie, they add that there is an impact of sort. It's almost like the ghosts are made up of a bunch of particles. And if you hit it, they will disperse and then they kind of come back together. And it's really cool. And they use it for comedy aspects, like getting hit by a car, getting stuck between a door because it's coming at the last second. They're not ready for it. So I like that aspect. They reminded me of the movie unrelated, but Ghosts, where there has to be a form of concentration to a degree for ghosts in order to do certain things. So when there's little things and moments where they can easily walk through a wall, but then if they're not prepared for something that makes contact with them, it kind of disperses them in a nice comedy effect.
Yeah. So speaking of which, they can get hurt though if the weapon is a ghost weapon.
Yes, this was so great. Great.
So the judge, hey guys, get down. He comes in gunslinging because the ghost dog stole his jaw to nibble on the bone. So in that scene, they established the judge. They established that, if the ghost weapon is around, it can hurt the other ghosts. And that brings us to the museum. So let's take a look here.
That is really cool because it kind of it's kind of distinguishing, like there are two planes, like there's a supernatural plane and a living plane, and anything from the supernatural plane can affect other supernatural entities. And it's cool because like you said, like if he takes a few shots and he hits Stuart in the cheek and like it busts his cheek open, and he's like, he could have killed me, and I'm like, I mean, you're dead already, what would happen? I don't know, but yeah, they do get affected.
So we're at the museum now, and this is a pretty wild scene. The ghosts are doing their work to distract the police because he sees a number on Magda's head, and then he says, "You're next." And she said, "Are you threatening me?" And he's like, No, I'm just trying to warn you because I know I can see things. You guys don't understand. So the police are there. The guns are drawn on our man, by the way. And
there was a couple times where I was like, you shouldn't do that. We got.
So we're shooting into a crowded space in the museum, and this is a man suspected of causing people's heart attacks. So it's like you can tell this is just peak, just over the top 80s, 90s action comedy, so to speak. And even when he grabs her and leaves, that's when they actually start shooting at him, even more. So I'm like, all right, guys, what are we doing here? But I get it. At that point, at least he's actually kidnapping somebody.
Yeah, and it was great. There's a lot of hijinks in here.
Yeah.
You have Cyrus and Stewart actually use the corpse of a mummy in order to scare the police, and they're walking her and they're shooting at it. And there's a lot of hijinks in here with the judge, the dog.
We got there he is.
Yep, I don't even want to specify what the judge does.
Correct.
I'm just going to say that the judge happens to be infatuated with the corpse of a mummy, and that's all you got to know. That's all you got to know.
Yeah.
It's a really ridiculously funny scene. Just so dumb.
Yeah, the judge is he's a bit of a scene stealer.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a scene stealer. It's pretty hilarious, but he's the one that comes to the rescue, you know?
Yeah.
And in a way, when Frank sees the Reaper,
dude,
he's like, oh well, maybe the judge can help save me because the judge has the ghost guns, you know, and unfortunately, that does not happen. But I know you love the judge, so
the judge is great. The judge is great.
Give him some
screen
time here.
I was really sad for the judge here because he does come to save the day, and we see the Grim Reaper approaching the judge from the rear, and you're kind of just like, oh no. And even Frank just lets out this like, judge, like trying to give him attention. And now help me, because I forget what that weapon is called. Do you know what that weapon is called?
A scythe?
Is a scythe? Is that what it is?
That's my guess.
I don't know what I don't forgive us. I do not know what it's called, but the Grim Reaper takes it and he legitimately cuts the judge in half. And this is the first time in the movie that we've really seen someone who was a spirit who had already died many years prior. Actually, I don't even know if the word would be killed because he's already dead, but the judge is essentially taken out by the Grim Reaper. And you're kind of just like, oh snap. Like, he's a legitimate threat to Cyrus, to Stewart, as well as he is to the people alive. And that's a scary villain.
So Frank does fail to save Magda from the Reaper, and which we just covered also, quote unquote, kills the judge. And it was in a car accident, actually. I mean, they were getting away, and his team actually kind of helped him for a little bit of a moment, but you know, the car flips over, and then as she's running away, the Reaper catches up, and she gets caught by the Reaper, and as she's floating away,
she's mad, dude.
Yeah, she's like, oh yeah, she still thinks he did it.
She still thinks he did it. I was so mad.
Yeah,
when I watched it as a kid, and I still get mad now, is that like the whole sequence in the car, it's a great sequence because like she's clearly scared, and she has every right to be. She's scared. And he's telling her, get down, I'm trying to save your life. And we start getting these flashbacks. The Grim Reaper takes his weapon and puts it under the chin of Frank. And he's like lifting him to the top of the car. Yeah. And it looks like Frank is starting to lose consciousness a little bit because he is bleeding. And all of a sudden, he just kind of has this reflection. He's remembering the car accident between him and his wife. And we're getting like a mirror image of what happened. And it's a horrifying experience, and they crash. They do survive the crash, and as she's trying to escape, the Grim Reaper like tackles her, and she falls like 20 feet, and she is clearly looking at Frank, like she knows it's not Frank. Like this is something that is otherworldly, if you will, and it does end up taking her life. It squeezes her heart, and she passes away. And Frank is dealing with the trauma of seeing what is reminding him of his wife's death. And as she's going to heaven, as you said, well, all we know, she's going in the tunnel. We'll see what happens.
Right. We don't know what happens.
We don't know. We don't know. We just know she's going to the tunnel. We don't know how the system works. Is she going to be judged? We don't know yet. All we know, she's going through the tunnel. But she's like, did you enjoy killing me? Did you enjoy killing me like you did your wife?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're so mean, even in death.
Yeah.
I was like, good Lord.
She had to get her jabs in right before she left. Right?
Very, very unlikable character, but I get why. Why.
So realizing the murders are pointing to him, Frank turns himself into the police. Yeah. He is then investigated by Milton Dammers, an eccentric and unstable FBI agent, traumatized by years of torture and abuse while working undercover with satanic cults. Dammers is convinced that Frank killed Deborah and is responsible for the high number of explained heart attack deaths in the town. So I wanted us to just give a love to Dammers right now because,
bro, we gotta give love to Dammers, dude. Like Dammers is like the judge. If Dammers is in a scene, he's stealing it.
Yeah,
he's so eccentric, and you can tell when someone is not only giving their all in the performance, they're going above and beyond. And he knows exactly what movie he's in, and he's blurring that middle line between horror and comedy, and he does such a terrific job, man. And he's no stranger to horror films. Many people know him as the Reanimator series, and he's got plenty more. But he absolutely crushes it. The moment he's on screen, you're kind of like, who is this character? And within seconds, you kind of get an idea of who he is and what he's about. And that's a testament to how good he is. What a ridiculously silly character, but he fits so well into this world that Jackson has created.
Yeah, Jeffrey Combs was a good casting choice for this character because he just goes for it. Whatever role you get for him. I remember him from the 4400. It's a TV show, and also one of my favorite characters ever from the DC universe. He played the Question in Justice League Unlimited. He did a great job as the voicing that character. So shout out to Jeffrey Combs. So Lucy visits Frank in jail, and they bond over their shared losses. He lost his wife. She lost her husband most recently. But then the Reaper attacks Lucy, who is now known as the number 41 victim. And Cyrus and Stewart are both killed defending her and Frank while they escape.
Yeah, this was sad. this was sad.
Yeah. Aware that he cannot protect her from the Reaper as a human, Lucy induces a near-death experience in Frank that uses drugs to slow his heart. And before we get to that, let's show a little love to Lucy here. Up until now, we don't really know her purpose in the movie. Obviously, she's the one that suffers a loss, and she loses her husband, and it's like, well, how are we going to tie this in here? You know, it's just like, all right, well, this is unfortunate, and now they're starting to connect while they're at dinner, while the husband is there, and you're just kind of like rooting for her in the sense that once you see that the numbers on her head, it's like, oh no, I hope the Reaper doesn't get her too. He's done for. If it's almost like with each murder, he gets closer and closer to being the one they pin it on.
Yeah, and he has no way of stopping it. Like, there's no way that he can physically stop this. He has no understanding, no way, no how. And the only two that could potentially help in this moment are Cyrus and Stewart, and we lose both of them in this scene. Like, they're fighting the Reaper, they're holding him back, and we end up losing both. And it's just like, oh God, like he's in a really tough position. And as you mentioned, they have a plan where they're going to slow his heart rate down. They're going to give him a near-death experience. And she's very quick. She's very smart because he takes a gun and he's ready to just like, I need to have an outer body experience. I need to have one right now. Like, he was so ready to do that to protect her, which is a testament to his character. Because he goes, I can't protect you, Lucy. I can't protect you like this. And he goes, I need to have an outer body experience. I need to have one right now. And he holds it up and he's like, just walk away, Lucy, just look away. And she's like, no, there's another way. And she introduces this really intelligent thing of just like, we're going to put you in like cryogenics, if you will. Like, she's going to slow his heart rate down. She puts him in a freezer. They lower the temperatures down, and they're going to do it. They're allowing him to be out of his body for only a mere few minutes. That's their plan. It's like, hey, we can let you out of your body for a mere few minutes, but we have to bring you back in at a certain point, or I'm not going to be able to revive you. And it's like, whew, now we're doing a race the clock kind of thing. And it was pretty fun.
Yeah, maybe Peter Jackson was giving a shout out to Flatliners.
Oh yeah. It's like, yo, you got just this amount of time. That's it. Yeah. It was like, yeah.
So, like, as we stated, she uses the drugs to help slow his heart in the freezer. Dammers captures Lucy, intending to let Frank remain dead, but Frank's spirit rescues her and inflicts enough damage on the Reaper to destroy his disguise. So This is a great scene.
This whole sequence is so good.
So I don't have the actor's name in front of me, but we have this general here. He plays the same character a lot of times, and he's the the drill sergeant, just keeping the spirits in line at the graveyard. But he's got these like double machine guns, mini guns, whatever you want to call them.
Oh yeah.
And he gets taken out by the Reaper, actually. And then Frank, he gets them, and he's like, I guess this is the only way for me to stand a chance against the Reaper.
I had to look him up because he's so good. It's R. Lee Ermey.
Yeah,
R. Lee Ermey. That's his name. And I was like, yeah, we had to give him a shout out because he's great. And he plays this, like, it's so funny because they introduce him throughout the movie a couple times where his job is to kind of like monitor the cemetery and make sure the spirits stay. Like he's got that drill sergeant and whatnot, and they introduce the guns, and it's like, oh, like we have these guns. Okay, so this whole sequence is incredible. This whole sequence is probably my favorite sequence in the movie. There's other fantastic scenes, but the sequence where Frank becomes a ghost and actually gets to get physical with the Reaper. It's so great because, first of all, you can tell that Frank doesn't really have an understanding of how this works yet, being this out-of-body experience. So he sees the Reaper on the car, and he kind of just leaps, and he's like flying through the air, and he's able to tackle it off the car. The Reaper ends up getting away because a big Mack truck comes and knocks him off. But when Frank gets to the cemetery and gets to throw down with the Reaper, it's incredible because the Reaper, dude, Lucy gets so many close calls. It's insane. So the Reaper actually gets his hands on her heart in the car, and he grabs her heart, and you see her struggling to breathe, and you don't even see it. You just hear Frank's character, and I won't drop any profanity. He just says like, hey, and he goes, a-hole. And the Reaper just kind of look, and you see Frank with these two giant ghost machine guns and just starts unloading in this guy. Just and I remember being like, this is so cool. And like, he's getting used to it. So like, he's floating in the air as he's jumping over the car, just and I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like, it was so cool to see that dynamic of him just blow this thing to pieces. Like, he literally blows the Grim Reaper to pieces.
Yeah.
And then we get to have a nice little conversation piece here.
Yeah. So he inflicts enough damage on the Reaper to destroy the disguise, revealing the Reaper as the spirit of Johnny Bartlett, who seeks to raise his murder count even higher after death. Though poised to finish Bartlett, Frank is then resurrected before landing the final blow, allowing Bartlett to escape. So Lucy brings Frank back, and we get this incredible shot with the icicles on the face.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's the shot in the trailer.
Yes.
Do you remember?
I remember this shot in the trailer.
I want to say they closed the trailer with this shot. And I said, this looks scary. I don't want to go to the theater to see it.
Because all you're seeing is Michael J. Fox, and he gets that very like, like that just in the eyes and the ice. And you're just like, what is happening in this movie? But yes, this was great. This was absolutely great. The first time you see the Reaper after he blows into pieces, it's a very ugly demonic face, dude.
Yes.
Like, it is a horrifying face. So up to this point, we have no reason to believe that this just isn't a traditional, like, a demonic figure or the Grim Reaper himself. Like, we're just like, oh, and he picks it up and he goes, who are you? And he hits it and hits it. As you mentioned, it reveals to be Johnny Bartlett. Johnny Bartlett tries to escape. And when Frank jumps down there again, for some reason, this is so great to me, Frank just starts punching the Grim Reaper as he's trying to come back together, like almost like the T-1000 who is kind of coming back together like Liquid. And Frank is just hitting, headbutt, like just doing everything. And he gets the weapon. And I remember being like, oh my God, he's got him. And he hits the ground. And when he hits the ground, you get to see Johnny Bartlett as legitimately Johnny Bartlett. And you're like, there he is. That's him in full form. And you start seeing like you hear this weird pulse sound, and you see Frank kind of, and you're like, what is that? Because I completely forgot. The first time I saw this movie, I remember going back this far as a kid. I was like, what's happening to him? I don't understand what's happening. And she's reviving him, and she wakes him up, and I was like, dog, he was so close. Like, he was right there. And he says it too, like he can't even breathe. And he's like, I didn't get him. And she's like, who? And he's like, Johnny Bartlett. He's back. And you're just like, and I can't imagine what Lucy's thinking in this moment.
Yeah, and I mean, but she had to, because then he would have been lost. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so she had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So while Frank recovers following his revival, Lucy warns her patient, Patricia, of Bartlett's return.
Mm-hmm.
Patricia reveals she is still in love with Bartlett and summoned him from hell to continue their murder spree. Plot twist. Crazy. Patricia kills her mother.
Oh yeah, brutally too, dude. You don't see it, but it's awful.
And this is while Frank and Lucy trap Bartlett in his urn and flee to the abandoned sanatorium, intending to take his ashes to the chapel and banish him back to actual hell.
Bro, it's so great.
Bonkers.
It's so great. And it's not even a trope, but it's the idea of like, all right, we got to get the ashes to consecrated grounds and stuff like that in order to send them back to the afterlife. And it's so great. And like the reveal of Patricia being this evil psychotic individual, because again, the movie try to downplay it, so we kind of go, oh, you know what, she was 15 years old. They make it a point to say she was 15, she fell in love with the wrong guy, she was basically following what he was doing, maybe she had no say in it whatsoever. They try to give you that type of story, but again, the mother tells us very early on, is like, no, there's something, like, she knows. But the mother comes off so cruel and evil that you're kind of like, well, maybe you're the bad one. They kind of leave us out there a little bit. So when they finally reveal that, like, no, Patricia is absolutely insane, and she actually is responsible for bringing Johnny Bartlett back so that they can continue the streak, that's absolutely just, it blows your mind. And now you've got like this new dynamic. Now you got a human villain as well as a supernatural villain. So now you have a villain on each plane, and they're trying to continue to rise those numbers again.
So while Patricia and Dammers each pursue the pair through the sanatorium, Frank experiences visions of the 1964 massacre, showing Patricia was actively involved in the murders. This helps Frank recall that Bartlett's ghost killed Deborah after the crash, and Patricia carved the number into her forehead.
Yeah.
This is his wife that he's thinking about here.
Mm-hmm.
So Dammers manages to corner Frank in front of the chapel and takes the urn, unwittingly releasing Bartlett before being killed by Patricia.
Dammers made me so mad here because, especially for Dammers, who has been through so much in his career, like, he has seen things, he has been a part of things, he believes in it too, like, he believes it, like, he believes Frank is telekinetic, can use telekinesis to stop the heart of people. So he believes in this aspect of the supernatural realm and whatnot, and he gets a hold of the urn, and he goes, let me guess, you gotta get the urn to consecrated grounds in order to send it, blah, blah, blah. He does the whole speech. And Frank is like, give me the urn. And he goes, and he just dumps it. And he goes, oops. And I remember just being like, and a great performance from Michael J. Fox. His eyes get all water, and he goes, you have no idea what you've just done. Like, they lost. And essentially, Frank is getting ready to throw down with Dammers. He's getting ready to hit him. Like, he picks up something, and he's going to go strike him. And unfortunately for him, Dammers has like an Uzi, and he shoots Frank in the arm. And I'm like, oh man, this is bad. This is so bad. But the thing that leads to Dammers' death is it's so cool the way they shot it. The visual of Dammers' death is so cool because he wants to shoot Frank in the front. He's adamant about that because I don't want to shoot you in the back. Turn around. I want turn around. And Frank sees Patricia at the end of the hallway with the shotgun. And Frank looks at the ground, and there's a hole in the floor. And he turns around, and he's staring Dammers right straight up. And he kind of just takes like this trust fall. And he knows he's going to go through the floor. And as he goes through the floor, Patricia takes the shot. And what I loved about this shot is that it's a static shot. There's no movement within the frame whatsoever. And Dammers kind of tilts his head. He takes the shotgun blast. His head explodes, but his spirit head remains. And it's a really cool visual. It's one of my favorite visuals in the movie.
Yeah. So Patricia supposedly fatally strangles Frank before moving on to the restrained Lucy. But as a spirit, Frank, so we see spirit Frank again, he pulls her soul from her body and starts ascending into the tunnel of light into quote-unquote heaven, dragging Patricia's spirit with him and forcing Bartlett to give chase. So we got a new superpower here. I could pull your spirit from your body. So this is another rule that the movie gave us.
This was a Mortal Kombat finish him moment.
Yeah.
Like Frank legitimately pulls her soul out of her body. And I remember I didn't know what was going to happen because Frank is really banged up and he can't fight. He can't do anything. And Patricia gets behind him. Johnny Bartlett is holding Lucy down and forcing her to watch. And as you mentioned, Patricia strangles him to death. And I was kind of like, what? Like, I was like, he's faking, right? Like that in that quick of an instance, I didn't consider the fact that his spirit would now be able to do whatever. And she grabs this giant pickaxe to take out Lucy. And I'm like, oh no, like what's going to happen? And then Frank just comes out of nowhere, legitimately hugs her from behind, says some profanities and pulls her soul out of her body.
Yeah.
And says like, you want her, you come and get her. And they go up the tunnel. And again, this was another really cool sequence. The sound design was great in this moment, as well as the visual, because you can tell that the longer they're in the tunnel, the faster it's getting. And you can hear it. Like it's like, and it's going. And like Johnny Bartlett is legitimately, it's a funny visual. He's legitimately doing like swimming motions to grab her as they're ascending to heaven.
Yeah, there they are. So
look at that. Oh, it's so great. It's so great. Like this shot, especially because what comes next is amazing.
Yeah. So that's them. That's him successfully grabbing her to go back to Earth.
Yes.
So Frank's floating back, to the good place, and they're floating back down. Oh, we got some unfinished business. So Bartlett frees Patricia and attempts to return to Earth, but unfortunately, they're consumed by a demonic creature and taken back to actual hell. So we have a drag me to hell moment here.
the visual
wild.
I don't even know how I would put it into words what we see. Like Frank makes it to heaven and he notices that they're like, oh, we're going back. Like we're going to finish. We're going to get some more. And Frank is going to go back in. And it's amazing. We see Cyrus and Stewart and they kind of go, hold on, Frank. No, just let it be. Let this play out for a second.
Right.
And the tunnel goes from this beautiful blue to a flesh-like living entity. And there are these weird tentacles with teeth that are chomping and like very similar to a snake. And they just start doing this weird anatomy thing on Johnny Bartlett and Patricia's body. And they're screaming. It's going through their eyes and through the mouth. And like it closes. And then you realize that they're in the mouth of a giant creature. And it does like the spaghetti slurp, like goes and it just slurps it up. And then it just dives down into the pits of hell. And one of my favorite things was like, you see that happen. And when it cuts back to Frank, he's legitimately standing like this. Like, what did I just see? Like, it's a crazy visual.
Well, you would think that, you're dealing with the supernatural and the afterlife that, I mean, the spirits have to go somewhere, right?
Yep.
We're not telling you where, until you actually see it. So as you stated, Frank arrives in heaven, where he is reunited with Cyrus, Stewart, and Deborah, his wife.
And Deborah, man. Yeah. This was good.
She sends him back to Earth and she tells him to be happy.
Be happy. Like,
right in the feels. And
bro, that got me.
Yeah, right in the feels. So sometime later, Frank demolishes the incomplete house, and he starts a relationship with Dr. Lucy, thankfully, who, following her own close encounter with death, can now see ghosts as well. And right before the closing shot of the movie, she says something about, oh man, he looks even more mad or whatever. He's still in death. And then Frank's like, you could see Dammers? He's like, yeah, I had a traumatic experience, so now I can see him too. And they end the movie playing along there. So that's our movie.
Yeah.
And we touched on it before in the opening here. So my initial thoughts were, for many years, so Ghostbusters 2 came out in 89. And we didn't get another live action Ghostbusters until many years later.
Yep.
Ghostbusters Answer the Call. And then eventually, you know, our newer ones here. What is it? Afterlife and Frozen Empire. There we go.
Yes.
But this was kind of the closest thing to Ghostbusters at the time. So we're looking at 96. And pretty interesting comparison, you know, because it did have those horror elements. It had the comedy elements. We had ghosts. And I don't know. To me, that it just felt like that. It felt like a Ghostbusters movie.
It did. And again, it's so nice to know that other people feel that way, and that was a comparison made by people, because again, that's how my uncle was trying to let me know. Like, he was like, oh, you're gonna like this, and I was so excited to watch it with my cousin. And we were like, oh, what? And he's like, yeah, there's ghosts in it, there's hunting ghosts, there's this or that, it's funny. He was like, it's like Ghostbusters. And I was like, a movie like Ghostbusters? Yes. And it definitely has that sort of vibe, you know. Again, we hadn't had anything like that in a while, so I was glad that Peter Jackson made something as fun as this one, because again, as a kid I loved it, and as an adult I still love it. It's one of my favorite movies to go into my rotation for the Halloween season.
So let's take a look at the budget and the box office. So chances are, when we say the word cult classic, it probably didn't make a lot of money.
That's the case.
Yeah, and that's what happened. The budget was 26 million, and the box office ended up being 29.3 million. So not that much. No major awards, but let's look at the production team for a second here. We have Peter Jackson,
dude,
of Lord of the Rings, and the Hobbit trilogy. You know, just the Middle Earth movies. Has won Oscars. We have he directed it. He also co-wrote it. With Fran Walsh, also of Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
And the Hobbit trilogy, you know, just collaborated with her several times. And the music by none other than Danny Elfman.
Yeah, boy. Dude, there's some scores in here. You're like, yeah, that's Danny Elfman, man. That's Danny Elfman.
Yeah, so just some name people here who went on to do some great things over the course of their careers. Elfman had been more established than Peter Jackson at the time.
Oh yeah, at this time, you know? I think he had become synonymous with some of these scores. You couldn't, for sure.
Yeah, mostly Tim Burton, but you know. Let's give some love to the cast. Of course, we have Michael J. Fox, the great Michael J. Fox as Frank Bannister. We have Trini Alvarado as Lucy, Dr. Lucy. We have Peter Dobson as Ray, Lucy's husband. We have John Astin as the judge. Yes, Sean Astin's father. Very long career. I'm going to give a shout out to Gomez from the original Addams Family TV show. We have Jeffrey Combs as Milton Dammers, who we expressed. You were gushing about Dee Wallace Stone as Patricia Badley.
I'm a big fan of Dee Wallace in general. So like watching her in this movie go through those different performances, where obviously in the first half of the movie, she's this victim, if you will. Like she's just like, oh, like, we can't do this, we can't do that, mother won't let me. It's very soft. And then when she has that flip of the switch, she's terrifying. Like she's got the maniacal laugh down, a lot of physicality in the role. And she just absolutely nails it. Like she was a huge standout to me in terms of performance. Like Jeffrey Combs, I felt like both of those people knew I gotta really bring it, and they did.
Yeah, Dee Wallace was great. We have Jake Busey, son of Gary Busey, but great career in his own right. We have Chi McBride as Cyrus, and we have Jim Fife as Stewart. So one of them, Cyrus being the '70s dude, and Stewart being the nerdy guy. We have Troy Evans as Sheriff Walt Perry, and we had mentioned it earlier, Arlie Ermy as the ghost of Master Sergeant there. So I am going to show some love to. I think the ghosts did a pretty good job.
They were fun, dude.
The team,
they were so fun.
yeah. Without them, this movie isn't as fun. Michael J. Fox is awesome. He's just awesome, isn't
Michael,
he?
dude. I love Michael. Like Michael's so great, right? Because here's the thing about Michael, right? Michael obviously is not a tall person. Michael is very short. And in movies, like oftentimes you'll have people stand on an apple box and things of that nature, so that way they don't look overshadowed in scenes standing next to other characters and actors and whatnot. But Michael has this energy to him and this personality that Michael never gets lost in a scene. It doesn't matter. He's such a great performer that no matter who he's in the scene with, because like Chi McBride is tall, dude. Like he's tall, and there are scenes with him and Michael J. Fox going back and forth, and there's not this weird like, oh, there's this weird dynamic of too tall and too short, especially for the framing and whatnot. But Michael J. Fox's performance is because he's so charismatic and he's such a good actor. And I remember being so excited because at this point in time when I saw it as a kid, could not imagine Michael J. Fox doing a horror movie. Again, when you talk about the trailer, the elements leaned a lot towards horror. And I remember being like, Michael J. Fox in a horror movie, and the shot of the icicles, and then cutting to the green lettering with a black layer with the green outline, like the Frighteners, rated PG-13 or whatever. And it was like, what? So yeah, Michael J. Fox is always going to get love and appreciation. He's great. He's always been great.
Yeah, and for me, this this is just a snapshot of the '90s. Just all these names here, and to me, this is just it's a testament of just Peter Jackson, just his small beginnings before he went on to do some incredible stuff in film. When we talk about not so much the Hobbit trilogy, but just the Lord of the Rings trilogy, some people consider that to be one of the greatest movie trilogies of all time, if not the greatest movie trilogy of all time. What he was able to do with that. So it's really cool to go back and see what Peter Jackson did. Some people have been saying, man, hey, we'd love to see Peter Jackson come back to horror again.
I would love it, dude.
Because there was lots of horror elements in Lord of the Rings, in the King Kong movie that he did. Lots of horror elements there, but we'll see what happens. We're gonna start winding things down here with some closing thoughts. And for me, I looked it up. This is one of the things I'm always gonna show some love to, and this is something that here in 2024, you know what I'm going to say, here in 2024, it doesn't happen too often. It does happen, but they don't make any money. And the fact that the Frighteners was an original, the Frighteners is an original, and it's now a cult classic, but good for them. And I'm telling you right now, if something like this is made right now, it's making a sequel, because there's so much material in this movie that they could have made a sequel if they wanted to.
Oh, 100%. I was having a conversation with somebody recently. It was like, they could have made a sequel if they wanted to, because that world is so big. There's so many different dynamics they could go. And it's such a great thing to say that, like, it's such a it's such a good staple of the 90s, seeing all the actors that are in the movie and the people that came together to make it happen, and a reflection of, like, just some of the originality. You had essentially a bunch of different stories that blended really well together. You had a murder, you had a little bit of a thriller aspect, because we have that twist at the end of the movie. We've got great comedy, and it's I think Peter understood the balance between the two, but the balance of comedy and horror always work really well together. We said that previously in other breakdowns when it comes to horror and comedy. Even some of the great directors out there now, like Jordan Peele, talks about it, where he talks about, like, there's really only subtle differences between horror and comedy, and that's why it's so nice to implement them together, because if you do it well, it just comes out fantastic. And I like that you brought up the ghost, because I think that Peter was able to have the ghosts kind of help out with a lot of comedy within the movie. And like, as you notice, when those characters are kind of eliminated from the movie, it's pretty serious moving forward, and they help in that dynamic with the comedy aspect. But it's a great movie, man. And I know that it's always unfortunate when a movie doesn't make as much at the box office, but I'm always happy when it finds a following. And I feel like The Frighteners is one of those movies that if you ask a lot of people who just love movies in general, I think it'd be hard for you to find someone who doesn't like this movie. If you're a fan of Peter Jackson, you like this movie. If you're a fan of Michael J. Fox, if you're a fan of 90s, comedy and horror. If you're a fan of these types of things, it's kind of hard to dislike this movie because, there's a lot of original aspects to it, and it's just fun, man. Like, there's so many serious, legitimate horror movies that are fantastic, and every once in a while, it's nice to just dive right into one that you just have so much fun with. Like, I could show this to my parents, man. You know what I mean? Like, this is a movie that I could show to my parents and not be like, is this too scary? Is this going to be too dark? Is this going to be, because sometimes I want to show them some of the movies we break down. I'm like, hey, mom, you want to watch The Oddity? And I'm like, maybe she can't watch that movie. Right. You know what I mean? But this is one of those movies that I'm like, no, you guys will have a blast with this. So I'm happy that it exists. Unfortunate that it didn't get the love that it was due when it first came up, but I'm so happy that this was one of those movies that everybody rented, whether it was a Blockbuster or a family mom and pop shop video store. I feel like this was a hot topic back in those days, and I hope we see more movies like it. They do exist, but this is always going to be one of those movies that I look back at with very fond memories, and it will be in my Halloween rotation every single year.
Alrighty, folks, that was the Panel Bros official breakdown for The Frighteners. If you could please give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, we'd appreciate it, as well as a follow on social media. Everything's at The Panel Bros. Please do that. Also, if you could leave us a comment down below of what you thought about The Frighteners, as well as let us know, what's your favorite horror comedy? Is The Frighteners one of your favorites? Please let us know as well. We are continuing along with spooky season. Yes. We have a few more left, and we hope you folks tune in for that. For Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying thank you for coming to the panel.